It's time to fight. It's time to fight. If you down to fight, then let's start the strike.
This is Shut It Down, the Amazon Teamsters podcast. I'm your host, Randy Corrigan, Director of the Amazon Division at the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. We're here to discuss more reasons why workers need a union contract at Amazon, specifically rights around immigration issues, specifically how workers are being impacted by ICE and our immigration issues on the job. As we get into this episode, you're going to be really moved by the stories these individuals tell about how they want to protect their workers, and most specifically, how you get union language, contract language in your collective bargaining agreement to deal with this very issue so that Amazon nor ICE can just willy-nilly run into a facility. Let's get right into this episode.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm an Amazon worker at DGT6.
Hey, I'm Juan Morales. I'm an Amazon worker at KSPD in San Bernardino.
So this episode's quite a stir right now as far as the issues kind of rolling through America right now. And it's an issue that I know that we have a ton of proposals from workers throughout the country regarding immigration issues, and workers that work at Amazon would like to have these immigration issues dealt with in a union contract. Before I get into something like what that is, what specifically some of that should entail, do you guys want to tell some stories about why this is important to you and why you feel it's important to some of your coworkers?
Sure, yeah. I mean, just first and foremost, I'm a child of immigrants. My parents came here back in the 80s, and that's not really unique. There's so many of my coworkers that's the same story that they have, that either their parents came here, or they themselves came here from another country. And, when we talk about workers are the ones who make the Amazon move, like, these are those workers too. And, I think we all have been seeing what's been happening on the news, both here in the Inland Empire and around the country. And it instills a lot of fear. And I think, like, we deserve to be able to go to work, to do our job so we can pay our bills without having that fear with us. And I hear a lot of my coworkers talking about that, and I just don't think it's right. And I think that we deserve more safety, more protection.
Michelle, would you like to add to that?
I mean, it's kind of basically what he said. I'm also a daughter from immigrants. I live in Mexico most of my time, so I kind of know the conditions and why people would like to come over here to the United States and kind of make like their life a little bit better. And still, they still have to go through all of this, so they should be a better way for them to be living and bring food to their tables.
I've been organizing workers for more than 30 years, and I've obviously had to encounter this issue many, many times over that 30 years. Interestingly enough, I've been around long enough to literally see the political winds literally sweep back and forth multiple times as time has gone on. And the one thing that typically really protects workers in this space is having good union language in their contracts to deal with the subject. In other words, making sure that ICE is not allowed on the property unless they have a valid warrant. In other words, the union contract can actually spell that out. Right now, the company has complete control over how they operate under a condition, or if ICE is going to come, or any government institution is going to roll in. The Amazon has control over how they allow them on the property. However, in a union contract, there's an agreement as to what that relationship's going to be. In other words, what are the conditions for it to happen, and what are the conditions for the engagement with the workforce? Is that something that would help deal with the fears and concerns and with some of the workers that you're encountering on the subject?
No, I think that so much of the fear stems from the fact that, Amazon hasn't told us what its policy would be. We had a petition at KSBD last summer where we raised this demand for Amazon to at least publicly commit to saying that they won't allow ICE in without a legal judicial warrant. And we got no response from them. They told us, talk to us one-on-one. And I did. I talked to the head of KSBD, our manager, Ruben, and he could not spell out to me what the process would be if ICE were to come to the door. And so, just that uncertainty, um, that's what we're dealing with. And yes, so I think like having language that's on a contract that's legally binding, I think that would quell so much of the fears that some of our coworkers have.
Yeah, clearly the employer is obviously operating an operation on the property,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the right to say, "Hey, this is what the rules are, and this is how we're going to handle specific circumstances and situations." But workers whom are working on that property have a right to have a say so in those rules, such as this. In other words, making sure that there is a proper warrant and a valid warrant and or subpoena in place prior to just walking on the job versus just coming in blindly, because clearly we're seeing a lot of this happening right now. And it's really interesting to see how people are very disappointed by the abuse of immigration and customs enforcement in this space specifically. It's not, in other words, they're not going to look for somebody specifically, because if they did, they would have a warrant. They would have specific information detailing what they're who they're trying to make contact with and try to understand or arrest them because there's something outstanding on them, versus just walking in and doing this sort of blind roll call and say, oh, well, you look like this, or you may be this, or you speak Spanish, or you speak a different language, so therefore I want to see this and I want to hear that. These systems were not originally built like that, at least the laws that are currently in place right now. So the companies have the ability to create some restrictions around it. And many companies have actually done that to this point. And it's important that Amazon starts doing that.
I mean, and right now I feel like because of that video that go viral about ICE on Michigan, I feel like a lot of people are afraid now to show up to work, and because they see that there's nothing that Amazon is doing and for stopping those people to come in. Also, like, we know that a lot of people in those, like, in Amazon, they do have a work permit, and that's not stopping them from detaining them or even deporting them to back to Mexico or where they're from. So
yeah, and in Southern California, it's Mexico or Middle America countries, Central American countries. In the East Coast and other parts, it's actually North African countries or from the Caribbean or other parts of the world. And ironically, there are big populations of them too, not just a handful of this country or that country, because in the immigration space, you'll have a lot of people coming from a particular part of the world who are immigrating legally, landing in a particular area because of there's a whole bunch of variables why there's a lot of them from that particular area, and so they're running into many different languages, not just Spanish, and it's not just Latinos or I'd say from those from Mexico.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, we saw in Minneapolis that they were going after the
Somalis, yes.
Yeah, the Somali community. And yeah, so it's something that almost anyone from any immigrant background is going through right now, especially like working in Amazon. I did a little research before coming on here, and I think somewhere around like almost 50,000 people. If we're just going to speak about Latinos, about 50,000 people in the IE work in Amazon, and the Amazon and the Inland Empire is about 50% Latino. That's like 25,000 people who at any moment in Amazon, if ICE were to go in, could face a possibility of something happening to them just because of the racial profiling.
Which we clearly see is happening. One of the other things that there should be language in the contract that specifically reads out no discrimination against immigrants, including employment verification, just because someone is an immigrant or because they look like one. Yeah. That too. That's a major issue that's happening with some of these employers in particular areas. Again, some employers have actually agreed to it, and in some areas, the employer is doing a really good job of making sure that they protect the workers within that workforce. Clearly, anybody who's broken the law or done something where there is some sort of subpoena or warrant, obviously that that law enforcement agency has got to do what it's got to do, and I think everybody would comply with that. I think really what we're talking about here is the racial profiling, the discriminatory sort of behavior, and making sure that people you can release that unease that's happening in particular areas. Michelle, did you want to add anything more to this?
Yeah, I just recently found out about with one of my coworkers talking about this issue that apparently now part of the hiring process is to go through like a language quiz or something related like that. That it's basically to prove that you're able to speak English, and I understand that because it's like it's the language of here, but also Amazon gives this like diversity of like languages and like religion and cultures around here. So I feel like even if you don't are 100% English speaker, you should be able to get hired. So a lot of people are on hold right now because of that issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think something that was pointed out is some of these things that we just discussed that I think it was El Super just agreed in their contract, in their union contract with UFCW, to put some of these very provisions in that contract to prevent these actual things from happening. So it's not just happened in the past. It's not just happened by others. It's currently happening live on the ground right now because of that activity of workers making sure that they want to feel secure in the workforce and not have that uneasiness.
Yeah. I mean, we saw, to speak about it now too, we just saw that I think in the San Francisco teacher strike with UESF. They went on a historic, I think it was 4-day strike. And one of the big things that they were able to win in their contract was sanctuary statuses for the schools where they're employed at.
Yeah, and from what I understand, also there's other locations where workers have won translation rights. In other words, right for there to be translation and make sure that workers understand. It's America's always been a melting pot. It's always been a country where there's been a lot of immigration happen, whether it's from the European countries at some point where everybody looked similar as far as white is concerned, right? Russian, Irish, Scottish, Dutch, and the list goes on, right? English. And then, as time has gone on, obviously you have other parts of the world that have immigrated into the United States. And we've always prided ourselves on that very issue. In other words, that you come to the United States, you bring your hard work, and guess what? That will translate into something good. Well, we should always be, and we in some cases have not been as good, and we probably are revisiting part of that, where we respect that diversity, we're utilizing that diversity. These employers are capitalizing on that diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of people coming from another country to come work. The employer's capitalizing on it. And guess what? You need to accommodate that with translation. Like that has always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has been able to, you've always had to have that ability to translate, regardless of what language you're speaking. So yeah, as time goes on, most people learn the language of English after being here. But when they first get here, again, immigrating legally,
Mm-hmm.
the condition to immigrate into the United States isn't you have to speak English fluently first. That's not. I mean, unless I missed a new law, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, So the reality is we've always prided ourselves on an America that's built like that has been that melting pot. Anyway, did you guys want to add some more to that?
Thank you for saying all that, because it is true. Like this is a country that has been built and really founded on immigrants. And something that also I think is important to highlight too is even like our labor movement. Our labor movement was born out of a lot of like European immigrants who, came here and were speaking different languages. And I remember I heard stories of like some of these big strikes that happened in Chicago or like in Minneapolis, where they would have like translating speakers on different podiums for our, the Italian workers, the Dutch workers, the Spanish workers. And yeah, they were able to gain protection. Like our labor movement was born out of immigrants building these protections for themselves too.
Yeah, and understanding that, we're not going to allow the boss to dictate this to us, right?
Mhm.
we have the ability collectively as workers in America, we have the ability to demand respect in the workplace, and respect also equals diversity, and respecting the diversity of the workplace, and understanding these dynamics versus leaving it kind of open-ended like you just said. Give you another item that should be in the language should be in the contract is not allow voluntary audit of immigration authorization and share that information with ICE without a court order. In other words, that ICE has got to go down and they got to get a court order and they got to go through the legal process. Don't just open the door and allow anybody in, because that's really when you break this down. And the American people, by like 70-80% recognize that this is kind of like a political football that's being kicked around right now. So don't allow workers who are working hard every single day to be caught up in that football that's being kicked back and forth.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like you said, legally, like when immigration and customs enforcement or DHS or BPB, when they want to do an audit, our employer has the legal obligation and the right to have 72 hours to return this information. And yeah, that's something that should be put in the contract, that should be the mode of operation, because like the alternative, just letting them in, that's when we get these horrible acts that happen.
Yeah, I remember, over the course of my career, I remember a campaign specifically that sticks in my head from about 25 years ago. And I would say about 50% of the workforce that we organized, they ended up getting a union contract. And I actually now get to see people retire from it, believe it or not, all these years later. Anyway, when we first organized that group 20 some years ago, about 50%, 40 to 50% of the group had some issue with their papers. Mm-hmm. But at the time, there were a lot of rules in place that were actually more favorable to make sure that if somebody was in the country working a certain period of time, didn't have any legal issues, that they were entitled to their job back, in addition to citizen status. And that just took some processes they need to go through retroactively, and they would be reinstated. And there should be a time frame. So in other words, the contract should clearly lay out that workers are provided with at least 4 months to resolve whatever paperwork issues are existing. Because many times people that are immigrating, and I obviously have dealt with this as a representative, where somebody's going through the proper process of immigration. They have not done it illegally, they've done it legally, and they're going through the steps. Sometimes what happens is you get the political issue where the rules change mid process for those individuals, and now the criteria for them has actually changed. Them being the ones that already immigrated, started the process, and then that process has now shifted on them and changed. So now they have to do something different, and sometimes it's unbeknownst to them. In other words, they weren't made aware of that change, or that change is happening on the fly and they're trying to comply with it. And then somebody makes an argument, oh, well, you're not in compliance with the new rules. Yeah, okay, well, the new rules came in like a week ago. Like, how can I be in compliance with something when I've been here for 3 years and I've been trying to get my immigration status, or maintaining the immigration status? The other issue that's out there that I know Amazon can't necessarily solve, or an employer can't solve, is that there's an exploitive sort of legal process to this. There's a lot of lawyers that are playing a game with this process and dragging it out for a long time, because they want to represent individuals through that legal process, and it's beneficial to them for it to be stretched out. Mm-hmm. Right? The more process there is for the person who's immigrating that needs legal assistance, the more difficult it is for that, the more money an attorney is going to make, versus it being easier to process, especially if you don't have any legal challenges or issues. I've actually run into personally these things as a union representative over and over and over again. And what's important is that the employer should be participating in that. In addition to, Amazon should be paying for the legal services of the employees, and or granting leave for those individuals to go through those processes and proceedings. This is where the employer is supposed to be proactive and engaged. You knew the worker was an immigrant worker when you hired them, and you understand they're going to have to work through these processes. As an employer, you also know that there's a political dynamic in this country where this thing gets kicked back and forth. Let's try not to keep hardworking people from, or let's try to prevent them from being caught in these systems and wheels of justice that turn too slow for them.
Having a system like that where, like you said, where Amazon can pay for the legal fees, and then also grant leave for workers who are going through the immigration process, because like you said,
and give them time.
Give them time, because like you said, they keep moving the goalposts around in it, so it's getting harder to score a touchdown. And yeah, because the inverse of it, right? Because like this is going through these legal processes is time consuming. It's fine. It consumes your finances, and double on top of that, we have workers who are scared to go to work. I know. I have coworkers who are in relationships, and maybe one person has like less than full legal status, but the other one does. I have workers who one partner is staying home, and then the other partner has to stay at work, pull overtime, because
Try to offset. Yep.
Because that's now one whole source of income that is just not available anymore. And so Amazon has the ability to like ease these fears, ease these tensions, these financial burdens on their workers, and they have more than the capacity to.
Michelle, hearing these sort of ideas and these things, these specific items in which the employer could agree to, does that sound reasonable to you? And would that kind of like lift that anxiety and change your feelings on what it's like to go to work?
I mean, yeah, totally. I personally been with a lot of my coworkers that have this situation, and they were put on a leave. So it's like, how are they supposed to fix this their situation when they're not allowed to work anymore, and they have to pay from their own pockets. So if they're not allowed to work, then how they're going to be able to get the money to fix the status that Amazon is asking for?
So both of you are from parents that immigrated. I think that's what you said, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think the reason why it's important to ask this question is, how do your parents feel about these types of things and things we're talking about? Because it sounds to me like they didn't go through similar challenges, right? I mean, looking at your age, having an idea about what your parents' age is, I understand what laws are on the books to help things be a little smoother for them and the political dynamics at the time. What's that? How does that impact your family life when you see this dynamic? And obviously it's got to hit home for you really good, knowing, or it's got to hit home for you in a way that is very genuine, because you're thinking back in time to how your parents had to manage this when they immigrated.
Well, I just feel like it was a little bit harder for them. I remember having this conversation with my dad, and he would tell me that back then, even a driver's license wasn't available for them because of this same situation. So it's just like going around with the fear that even a cop can pull you over, and that, I mean, they will share that information. They will not keep that information for themselves. So it will be like easier for immigration to find them and kind of like kick them out of the country, basically, for this little benefits that now a lot of us have and still fight for.
My parents had, a tough time when they first came here. And, by the time that I was born, they had already gotten their citizenships. But, the fear doesn't go away. I remember growing up, my mom, like when we were driving home, if there was a car that was like lingering behind us for too long, we would take like a longer route home, because like the constant fear of immigration being behind you. Even though at that point that they had legal statuses, constantly like on.
Did you guys grow up in California?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. See, for a lot of us, it was Prop 187. Like obviously, I'm the white guy in the room, so I didn't experience it from that perspective. But I remember this onslaught that happened many years ago that talked exactly about what your parents are referencing to you right now. And the mistake that was made in this political situation was it really created an awareness for change that change drove better policy in the state, that not just drove better policy, it engaged more people to be involved. More people started voting. More people started saying, hey, you're not going to do this in our schools. You're not going to do this in this place. You're not going to do this in that place. And that policy led to an easier pathway for people like your parents. In the beginning, obviously they were running into those struggles because of the political dynamic. And then those changes kicked in because of that political dynamic, where people rose up just like you're talking about right now. And the interesting dynamic that you have here is, in any workplace, the only place that you can demand this is where you're organizing or you have a union contract. That's what's so unique about your guys' opportunity, or workers that are organizing and or under a union contract, is these demands that we're referencing at work can only happen in an organizing environment. What does that make you? How does that make you connect to the broader part of the broader workforce as a result of that? You should feel, kind of like, hey, maybe we can lead the charge on this.
Like you said, it's only through organizing that we actually have the power to make these demands. Like right now, if I was to go on our little forum board that we have for work and be like, hey, demand some protections from ICE, like they're not going to pay attention to me. But as we build power within the shop, as we build power across the region in different shops as well, like that's the one thing that gives us the leverage, because we as workers, like it's our power as workers, as the ones being able to move the boxes, that gives us the power. But that power is only manifested when we do it together. Yeah, and especially here in the Inland Empire, I think that we have like a real unique opportunity in that, like, Amazon is one of the biggest employers here. And I think if Amazon workers in particular take a huge stand around this,
it's going to lead for all workers.
Exactly.
But I think it's important for us to drill down on this type of stuff, because what happens is I know what's always inspired me about subjects like this is when you read labor history, you really see this issue repeating itself literally for 250 years of our country. I mean, clearly, as Juan, you were on a prior show and you pointed out some labor history and how inspiring that labor history was. As difficult as this moment is, boy, I'll tell you what, not as bad as it was to literally be enslaved, right? And so the point to it is that those that came before us have had to, in a lot of ways, have had to overcome very difficult circumstances for us to have some decent opportunities, right? Because in 1776, this country was formed on slavery. And so I mean, they went and kidnapped people, brought them here and enslaved them. And then that created a larger problem for the labor force within America as itself. It took 100 years, nearly 100 years to break that. And then even after that, another almost 100 years to start to get some rules on the books to be somewhat fair to workers. And so when you look at the journeys in which a lot of workers had to go through, I share these stories more to point out that we owe it to them to not allow a degradation in what they fought for. So I think about how much easier it was for workers to combat this situation just 20 years ago, 25 years ago, compared to now. And why is this going backwards? As a society, we're supposed to improve our position as time goes on, not regress, especially in the face of like playing politics or playing the game. And so for me, it's always an inspiration to look at workers like yourself and others before us that paved the way to make sure that another generation, the next generation, didn't have to succumb to those types of pressures.
I'm glad you brought up the history a bit, and I'm really honestly glad that you also highlighted the fact that, like, this country was founded on slavery. We had that was an incredibly grotesque form of operation that we were doing here, but also, like, to highlight something, to talk about labor history within that, like if we talk about what led to the end of slavery, it was workers. It was because they were workers walking off the plantations. It was
That is
W.E.B. Du
correct.
Bois called it the America's first general strike. Um, but yeah, I think that there's a lot in history that we can look to. We can even look back just 20 years ago, um, when there was the huge Day Without an Immigrant movement, and at that same time there was the it's the Smithfield Meatpacking Factory in Tar Heel, North Carolina, that was unionizing under UFCW, and there was a lot of fear. ICE had just been constructed like 2 years prior. They were deporting people. There was a really racist Sensenbrenner bill that was going around, and in this factory there was over, I think, like 4,000 immigrant workers, and in the face of the fear of this big racist bill that would have made it a felony to be undocumented, of ICE going around kidnapping people, much like we're seeing today, uh, thousands of these workers, documented, undocumented, walked off the job, fought for their contract, got their protections, and yeah, I think that that's definitely history that we should be looking to and be really inspired by.
Yeah, and I think there's also stories around you that are inspiring you to help each other. Like maybe not on this grand of a scale that we're discussing this particular moment, but smaller, really same thing. Michelle, at your location, you guys just walked off the job in December, right? Like you had a number of issues that you guys are rallying around, a number of issues that you're raising up to deal with, and you're meeting that moment. Describe how that makes you feel to inspire other workers to take control of their future.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people don't know about the power that we have together, and they're afraid of basically going to this alone. A lot of the people are going to the same thing. A lot of people have lost so many family members because of this. They've been deported, so they seeing that we're able to fight and we have each other's back, it's a little bit comforting for them to be able to come to us. And I feel like it feels good when one of my coworkers comes to me and be like, "Hey, I'm having this issue, but I'm afraid to speak up, or I'm afraid to go like to management or anything like that. Can you come with me?" Or I say yes, like I'll go with you, and even gather the people that we're here together unionizing this building. We this is about what we're trying to do in the workplace, to kind of have a lot of communication with ourselves and be able to go together and fight for this or anything together.
What made you get over your fear so that you could be that rock or that stability for that worker when they come to you? How did you conquer that fear?
Just pushing myself, because even when I started and I was learning about all of this and I was invited um, to see how this was going to be, I was afraid. I would be like, I don't know, how am I going to be able to speak up in front of a lot of people and be their voice too? But I mean, little by little, that I went to a lot of like protests too, that we were getting invited and giving information to other people outside our workplace, and sharing this is it's just you get used to it. And also people come to me and they say like, hey, maybe next time also you can do this, or same another step of words too. So I feel like also that people come to me and they give me a little bit of feedback. it's uh, it's a good way to start.
And doesn't that feel good to be in that space where you're helping your fellow coworkers, you're helping individuals that are, kind of getting through life and trying to do the best they can for their family or the household or their kids or their spouse or whatever it may be. And they're looking to you because you have just a little bit more experience in that space. And then you see them tackle it, and then now they're next to you the next time you do something. How I know for me, that's always an awesome feeling. What's that for you when you are actually engaging in that?
Yeah, it does feel amazing. See them also, um, for them to be able to do that with us, or sometimes they even want to
They do it
do
without you.
it. Yeah,
Yep.
they want to do it without us, or they're like, maybe next time I want to lead this type of like situations in the workplace, like going into management, I want to say something. So I feel that that's when we see that a lot of people are actually feeling the support for everyone.
Clearly this movement is growing. It is everybody's seeing it growing. Only Amazon's in denial.
Yeah.
And I think what's important here is, what do you guys have any last words of advice for the listeners, for people, workers just like you, that are kind of peering into this or listening into this, and they're kind of going, okay, how do I do this? What's my next step?
I guess I would say to not be afraid, even if in the beginning it does scare you a little bit. Don't be afraid. You're gonna get through it. Find your people in your workplace. Find the people that you feel more comfortable with, and share your experience so they can share also their experience too. And I feel like that's gonna help you connect more with your people and for yourself too.
To piggyback off of what Michelle says, I think it's important to be courageous, because one thing I've learned is that courage is contagious. Like, I think a lot of our coworkers have fear, but as soon as they see someone else standing up, it makes it a little bit easier to stand up as well. So I think I would definitely echo that. When we're in the shop, like, we're all the same in there. It doesn't matter where we come from. It doesn't matter what our background was, where our families came from. Like, we all clock in, we all work, take our breaks, our lunches, and then we clock out and go home and pay our bills. And I think we should all recognize that and work together as much as possible.
Hearing you all explain how you're conquering your fear, recognizing collective action makes a difference. In the end, workers have control. They have complete control. It's when you want to exercise that over the employer.
Yeah.
The employer is always going to be trying to exercise it over you.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is you make sure the packages move, you make sure the product gets done, you make sure something gets from A to B. Nothing happens without collectively you getting your job done. So when you collectively withhold your labor and or utilize that strength to force the employer to do something that's right, you're not asking them to do something that's crazy or outlandish. What you're doing is you're making sure that workers are coming into an environment that's fair, safe, that is equitable, and that clearly we've talked about this before. You want an environment where you come to work and you're able to buy a home in the area. Mm-hmm. You're able to buy goods and services at a level in which is respectable, especially an extremely wealthy corporation. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for joining us. Make sure that you join us at teamster.org/Amazon. This has been an incredible show. I know for me, I always love to hear how history ties into someone's family, their interactions at work. And I think we have a perfect example of Michelle and Juan here, both coming from immigrant families and understanding that dynamic that their coworkers are faced with, and making sure that next generation, or even the next hire next month, right, or next year, doesn't have to incur some of these fears in which you're facing. Man, this has been incredible. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your stories and explaining why you're continuing to build worker power at Amazon. Thanks for listening. This has been an incredible show. Thank you.
Then let's start the strike. Corporate greed is disgusting. Instead of us, they rather pay for union busting. Somebody said the working man a sucker. They took the stand and ran like a high jumper. Teams local 804, we not having that. We gon' stand here and fight for fair contract. Fair wages on the table.